All guests on ZASLOW Show 2.0 brought to us by the official beer of the program, Johnny Cuba. European roots with that Caribbean soul, a refreshing German lager in a can. You pick up a six-pack of Johnny Cuba right now. Your local Sedanos, Presidente, Winn-Dixie, Fresco y Mas. That's how you're going to enjoy an evening, just like we do here in the ZASLOW Mansion. Make sure you always drink responsibly, and don't forget Johnny Cuba's mantra, stay tranquilo. Our pal is ESPN's Israel Gutierrez joining us here. Been a long time since we've spoken, Israel. You doing all right? Everything good in the Gutierrez casa?
Everything's great here in the mansion. When the Heat aren't playing especially well, the mood in the mansion's a little bit altered because it's shocking. Not because of anything else, but just because it's shocking.
Well,
but yeah, everything else is good.
We'll talk about the championship games, and we'll look a little at the Super Bowl. I don't know if we're quite there yet. But yeah, let's start off with the Heat here, man. I wasn't even mad about last night's loss because I guess I expected them to lose that game last night, considering the current state of the team. What did you make, though, of Jimmy Butler post-game where, Jimmy did the thing where he's not worried. We know what kind of team we are. We just need to get back to having fun. Obviously, it's not fun losing 7 games in a row. But that's we've come to expect that. He's in his 5th year here. He's very nonchalant. When things are high, he's at one level. And when things are low, he's at another level. What do you make of Jimmy's comments last night?
I thought they were pretty measured. I thought, in this organization, the patience is such a huge deal. And they really are sort of in a position now where they're just, all right, they maybe have had, or not maybe, I say maybe because they could have a worse stretch than this down this throughout the rest of the season. But if this is their worst stretch here, they're, in 7th at the moment, I think, within 3 of those teams that are in 6th and 5th. And so they can recover from this. But I think the key part of what Jimmy said there was having fun. And that's been one of the things that I've just thought about this team for a long time, right? So the joy that you play with, let's say the Warriors play with, right? That Steph brings to the game. Or if you remember, with Dwayne Wade, it was always that sort of, wow, what's going to happen? That wonder, maybe he'll have this tremendous play and, we'll all have our jaws dropped and, standing ovation and all that stuff. And I think with this group, especially because Jimmy is the leader and just his personality, and then Bam with his personality, there isn't that obvious just outburst of joy all the time, right? The way
they're a very serious group for the most part.
And the way that they play doesn't really lend itself to, these outbursts of joy. Exactly. And so I think when things aren't going well offensively, it just feels terrible. It just feels like, why are we this bad? It shouldn't be this bad, especially now. It's, arguably the most talented starting 5 offensively they've played with under Jimmy. So I think I can't say when necessarily, but if the offense and the players find a rhythm within, whatever it is they're trying to do, I think they'll eventually be pretty scary. But I think you see the growing pains of even Tyler Hero, where he's not the best option for sort of probing and finding teammates and stuff, because he'll turn the ball over and it's just there's no real consistency there. And now he's, been told to be more of a catch and shoot guy, which is not his favorite thing in the world. And so these little hiccups or these little issues that they have to work through with Terry Rozier now and everybody else healthy, Jaquez back, etc. I think you got to give them at least about another week or so to figure this out before they start to panic.
Well, yeah, so you say another week or so. That'll bring us right close to the trade deadline. What do you think is going on where Pat Riley sees this? It's a 7-game losing skid, which shit teams go on 7-game losing skids. A really good team, all right, you're going to have moments you lose 3 in a row a couple times during the season. 7 games, you're usually a terrible team if at some point you have lost 7 games in a row during the season. Do you think and I think this is the longest losing streak ever that Eric Spoelstra has had, because the last time they lost 7 in a row was 2008, and Spo's first year was 2008-09. So I believe this is the longest losing streak he's ever had. What do you think's going on upstairs? Does Pat Riley look at this and say, look, it's This is not where we need to be, and we go for a major shakeup.
Well, I mean, you have to, and again, this is why I talk about patience. They've been rewarded so many times, the organization, for being patient and trusting, their decisions. And I do think, though, that there might have been some things that have sort of run their course. I don't think, for example, me personally wouldn't move on from Duncan Robinson, but I do think that some of those ideas that he was untouchable is probably not true. And
Well,
I
yeah,
think
we know that's not true.
right. And so, like, if you look at the way the team was playing when they were shorthanded and guys were stepping up, like those are real for those players, but they're sort of moments that come when you're in a rhythm and when you're regularly getting these looks or these opportunities. And I think when you start to dwindle them, they're not going to feel as good. It's the same thing with Bam. Bam's offense was, numbers wise, like counting numbers, was pretty good. Like early on, it was the best he's played. But if you look at the efficiency, not really there. It was just more because he's getting more opportunities. And hey, look, I can do this. I can hit this shot consistently. But when you're getting them less regularly, you're going to see, like last night, where it's just like, it just doesn't look like he's ever played offense before in the NBA. And so, I think they will figure that out eventually. But I do think that there may be a small tweak. I think part of the whole, hey, Tyler, catch and shoot a little bit more. So maybe they don't necessarily need the threat of Duncan and can sort of get more of a different type of player if you trade him. But I also I look at this team and I think, okay, maybe another big, maybe. But if Kevin Love is healthy and he's playing the way he had earlier in the season, I don't even think you need that. So I think it's more of figuring out what you have now than thinking that one trade's going to change anything. If you're going to make a drastic trade, like let's say trade Tyler or something at this point, it's going to be such a big move that you just don't know how it's going to work until you see what players we're talking about.
What do you make of the Rozier trade? How do you think that's going to play out?
I mean, I liked it. I mean, he is essentially, a little bit more athletic version of Tyler. Can handle physicality a little better, but similar types of games, and I think when you look at what you gave up for him, I think that's a great move. Like at the end of a shot clock with Kyle Lowry with the ball in his hands, it's a disaster. He's going to pump fake and hope to get a foul and then, fade away and throw something high off the ceiling. With Terry Rozier, he might be the best option on the floor if the offense breaks down, to be able to get you some sort of emergency shot. So I think in just that respect alone, he's an upgrade. He can defend. He's not going to, do the well-timed charge taking the way Kyle Lowry had. That's just an instinct on defense. But I think he's definitely an upgrade and worth that first-round pick.
Let me ask you a couple other NBA things here. Did Doc Rivers pull a snake in the grass move with the Bucks?
I don't know. You mean in terms of just being an advisor and then sort of like, I mean, I think the advisor thing was more of a desperate move from the Bucks. And if Doc sort of saw this happening, then maybe. But I don't know if, like, I don't think he went into this first year of broadcasting again and said, all right, I'm going to be gone by the middle of the year. Like, there isn't a situation where coaches are just like, oh, yeah, I can definitely take a team midway through the season and win a championship. And that's pretty much all Doc would want at this point, is a chance for a championship. And this was the only ready-made championship team that was willing to give up its coach. And so I don't think it was dirty. I think if you're going to look around the league, if you're the Bucks and say, hey, what if this doesn't work with Adrian Griffin? Doc was probably the backup plan all along, whether or not he was an advisor. I don't think anything crazy happened. I do think that it was a good move for them. One of the things I said at the beginning of the season, I was like, I can guarantee you one thing for sure right now. The Milwaukee Bucks are not winning the championship. Not the first year with Dame, and not under Adrian Griffin's first year. And now with Doc, I think that changes a little bit, because he can sort of fast track the knowledge there that's needed to get to that championship level. And then maybe they can, show some sort of defensive presence in the playoffs. But I guess we'll have to see that first.
They lost last night in Doc's debut. It was against Denver last night. I actually give Milwaukee a lot of credit for moving on from Adrian Griffin, because they identified there's a problem, and rather than wait till the problem becomes a disaster, meaning a first round exit. Let's try and fix the problem before the really bad thing happens. So I actually give them credit for having some foresight in this situation, but then I get confused where it's like, all right, you got a team that's underachieving. Doc Rivers is the guy that you're going to get?
I mean, I think it's a team that has done it before, like the main parts of it, Middleton, Giannis, Brook Lopez, etc. They've won. They know how to. They just need the right direction. And I do think that I don't know if you know when you have the right guy. I just know if when you have the wrong guy. And for all the the red flags that you heard or read about, I think that was a decent enough sign. But I think if you just have to read the players and you see how happy they were the first game that he wasn't there and they're dancing
That was
around.
a bad look, though, man.
It
Like, that was
was.
lame
It
as hell.
really
Because here's the
was.
thing, man. Adrian Griffin, maybe he is a shithead coach, all right? But Adrian Griffin, for years, worked to get an opportunity as head coach. It only lasted 43 games. And the reality of it is, because of the way it went down, he's probably never going to be a head coach again. And they're dancing. Like, they're dancing, man. That was a bad look.
It wasn't great. But it's telling, right? I mean, it's not my job to worry about what you're going to do next job. I'm just thankful that our opportunity to win a championship isn't going to be ruined by you. And I think, like I said, it's telling. And I think it goes along. I don't think Adrian Griffin is done getting a job. I think it was such a unique situation. Like, he wasn't brought in to coach Damian Lillard. He was brought in to sort of nurture that team, and hopefully they can find some sort of vibe and get to an NBA Finals again, and Giannis can go bonkers. But then Damian Lillard came and changed the whole dynamic, and then he at least has that excuse, right? And Terry Stotts, that whole situation. Like, I mean, don't really mean this, but who is Terry Stotts? Like, okay, yes, he was a head coach, and he was the head coach of Damian Lillard, but he was also an assistant coach right now. And so the fact that those two didn't get along isn't the end all for Adrian Griffin. And so I think if he is any good and he wants to keep fighting for it, he has a built-in excuse of why it didn't work for him.
What do you make of the new rule this year, which is the players have to play at least 65 games to be eligible for all the offseason awards? And that's now a topic of conversation right now, because we're getting close to the threshold for a bunch of guys who are deserving of awards. Guys like Joel Embiid, guys like Tyrese Halliburton. Like, now the clock is kind of ticking on those missed games. This has now become a story. It's been a story for years. Players missing games, load management, and not playing. So the NBA, it's pathetic, but the NBA has to institute rules to make players actually play. Very pathetic. And now a big storyline in the middle of this season is, again, players not playing because we're reaching that 65-game threshold.
So I don't hate it, in large part because it forces us to, I liked it because I've always voted that way when I got votes regularly. Was, hey, the differentiating factor between these two close players is how many games they played. If one guy played 5 more games and kept up that level, I think it's worth that being the tiebreaker. And so for the voters, and frankly for the fans as well, if these players who you've thought for, I don't know, 30 games, not that long, were the MVP, were all NBA, well, it's forcing you to have to continue to watch and pay attention throughout the season from games 1 to 82, because now maybe you have to say, well, wait a second, is Giannis the MVP because of what he's doing to maintain, whatever was going on over there? Is Shai Gilgeous-Alexander the MVP because he's playing a ton of games and, is leading that team to the top of the Western Conference? Do you have to start looking at, I don't know, Anthony Edwards and some of these other guys, Jalen Brunson for first team All NBA after throughout the course of the season, instead of those guys that you think are absolute fixtures there? And as much as, Embiid's season, if he averages 36 a game and doesn't play enough games, it's still going to go down as an amazing season and, the highest scoring season since whatever, Wilt, if he gets higher than James Harden there. But he's not going to have the award. And I think if it's a 1-game difference between the person who wins the award and the person who doesn't, I think if the stats are heavy in favor of the person who's played one less game, that's going to be troubling when you look at it that way. But if it at least forces you to look at the entire landscape and weigh, hey, if Shai Gilgeous-Alexander carried that burden for a dozen more games than Joel Embiid, and their teams have similar, or maybe Shai has a slightly better record, I think it's okay to force yourself to look at the other guy based on whatever this arbitrary number.
So speaking of MVPs, let's talk about the championship games from Sunday. Lamar Jackson, woof. I mean, he had a great year. He's likely going to win his second MVP. And it's funny, though, because I remember when it got to late in the season, maybe it was like heading into the final week, because whoever it was he faced in week, maybe it was after the game against the 49ers where the Ravens killed them, and it was a big MVP matchup, but Lamar Jackson versus Brock Purdy. It was when Purdy was still in the conversation. Like, What more does Lamar Jackson have to prove? And then we see what happened here. They won one playoff game. You know, it's a massive disappointment of a season for the Ravens. Does this take much away from Lamar Jackson? And what do you make of all the criticism that he's obviously receiving and is going to continue to receive until next season?
Well, if I'm a Dolphins fan, I'm sort of laying low and being thankful for the Cowboys, for the Eagles, for the Ravens, for these teams that have suffered probably a more devastating collapse, because at least the Dolphins prepare you for their collapse by struggling in December. But I think with Lamar, that everybody who was just sitting there taking it, as everybody else was saying, see how good Lamar is. You guys were wrong. He's the greatest. Look at these 2 MVPs before 26. Nobody's done that. It's just going to get louder next playoffs, because everybody who's defending Lamar is it's going to be their turn to sit and eat it until he wins in conference championship game and gets to the Super Bowl. And I think it's got to be maddening. Like, this is that feeling that you had when Tom Brady was here and playing, and in his first round of, playoff excellence was, man, there's just something about that team. They're going to figure it out. And that's what the Chiefs are right now. And Patrick Mahomes, like, I was thinking about this late in the season where everybody's like, oh, the Chiefs are in trouble. And every time I watched them play, there was multiple times where Patrick Mahomes sat back in that pocket and had plenty of time and I'm just like, I don't see that for Tua. Like, I don't see that for a lot of these other quarterbacks. Why is it that when it matters most, it feels like Patrick Mahomes has a ton of time back there? And when he doesn't have time, sometimes he finds, he manipulates a pocket so well and just creates these plays. And it just feels like the rest of the team just lifts itself up to match his level. And I know the defense has been great all year long, but I mean, to go to Baltimore and to do that, the 10 points to that Ravens team that has just been overwhelming at times, and was getting Andrews back, and, had all their talent and had Zay Flowers scaring everybody. And then it just changes. And I think, like, when we look back, if the Ravens end up winning something, it's probably going to maybe be a year where Mahomes is hurt or the Chiefs are just awful. Because if they're even close, like if the Chiefs are in the playoffs with that even one home game, I'm going to pick them to win it every single year. They've gotten to that level. So it's hard for me to just say the Ravens are crap Lamar should be ashamed of himself when they lost by one touchdown to this Chiefs team and this guy who's going to go down as, and it's crazy saying this at the tail of Tom Brady's career, but Patrick Mahomes is going to go down as the best guy we've seen play the position.
Do the Super Bowl wins matter? Are you willing to say that Mahomes is going to win 5 more Super Bowls?
Well, to me, if we're ranking one ahead of the other, longevity is huge. Like, he's got to do this for a long period of time. But if you're just judging their ability and their performance in these small windows, 1, 2, 3 years at a time, like, I don't think we've ever seen Tom Brady do any of this. Like, just carry a team. Like, yeah, he had teams with no receivers that he sort of lifted to playoff success, but it didn't feel like he was doing it as sort of single-handedly as Patrick Mahomes. He's not out of the pocket, finding guys on the run, or at least he wasn't necessarily. I mean, it's pointless to compare them right now, but I do think it's like Tom Brady's got to be thinking to himself, damn it, man. Like, can I hang on to this, title, this fake title for longer? Because this guy's coming for it right after I'm done.
Does Belichick coach again? I think he's done.
It's 15 games away, though. Like,
well, I think he wants to coach.
I got a question for you.
I don't think anyone wants him.
I said this on ESPN Daily, and I don't know if people agree with me or not from down here, especially like older folks who remember more of the 70s and 80s Dolphins. But doesn't it feel like it should be Bill Belichick's record and not Don Shula's? Like, I love Don Shula and everything that he did, but it was, I mean, not to say he was a compiler, but he didn't have the level or the stretch of years that Bill Belichick did.
Look at all the quarterbacks, the different kinds of teams that Shula had success with. Obviously had success with Johnny Unitas, then went to Super Bowls with Bob Greasy as his quarterback, with Earl Morrall as his quarterback, with David Woodley as his quarterback, and then obviously all the success with Marino, got to Super Bowl with Marino. Belichick only had success with Brady. Like, I don't think that the record should be Belichick's.
Yeah, I mean, so I at the time when I said it, I was like, I don't know if this is prisoner of the moment thing, but it just feels that way. Like, I don't know if Don Shula was as revered. Like, I don't know if he was ever really thought of as the greatest coach at the time, like innovative or just, whatever. And so I don't know.
And by the way, how about Shula always being known as a defensive guy, and then of course completely adapting to personnel when he got Marino, and then you had these amazing offensive teams. I think what you're saying is right about. Okay, good. I think what you're saying is right about. I don't know if there was ever this regard for Shula where you're watching him and it's like you're watching the greatest coach of all time.
Right.
He did end up with the all-time wins record, but now, and yes, of course, it was the opposite with Belichick. But Belichick only won one way, and it was with Brady. That's a fact. And
which is
Shula
why I'm kind of
had
happy.
A bunch of different guys.
I would be very happy to see him in a different organization because which is why I thought the Falcons were a realistic option, because that organization is going to have to give itself to Bill Belichick. Like, it's, hey, whatever we call it, the Patriot way, the Belichick way, everybody has to be invested in it and has to be believing in it. And I just don't think you can recreate that. I don't. And so he would really just be coaching for the wins record. And I think it would be transparent. So if he doesn't get one, it would be shocking when you think about it from the time that he retired. Like, of course he's going to get another job, but if you really think about what it requires to be a Bill Belichick coached team organization, I just don't know if the people are, if the organizations are going to buy in believing, oh yeah, every player that we bring in is going to buy into Belichick's system. Those things were cracking well before Brady left there.
Yeah, I think it's over. I don't think he coaches again.
Well, as a Miami person, I would be happy about that. That's one more thing for Miami to hang on to, is a Don Shula record.
What'd you make of Dan Campbell? Are you blaming Dan Campbell?
Yeah, I mean, so I was looking at, somebody asked me if they thought Mike McDaniel would make the same decisions. And I was like, well, if it's this year, if it was this playoffs, I think Mike McDaniel would have absolutely kicked the field goal in the first half, given how many, outside of the Fail Mary, there haven't been very many good end of halves for the Dolphins. And so pretty sure that PTSD would have kicked in and he would have kicked the one before the half. And then at the end of the game, I think absolutely he would have tied the game. I think it's different if you're on, the 5-yard line, if you're knocking on the door of the goal line, but they weren't, and they should have just taken that field goal and just felt like a brand new game. And I think if you are that coach that is sort of relying on the emotion and relying on the rah-rah and everything else, you can tell your team in the fourth quarter, hey, it's a brand new game. We're tied. We have this much time to just outplay these guys. Let's do it. And I think it would have, put them in a good state of mind, frame of mind going into those last few minutes, as opposed to just sort of the ballsiness of calling it on fourth down and going for it. Like, you've done that all season. Like, I would feel better having the NFC Championship tied than just having gotten the first down, because you still had more work to do in that situation. So I don't know, as somebody who normally thinks in sort of the way the players would think, I think even probably 51% of that team at the very least was thinking, let's take the points here. I know what we've done all season long, but it's the NFC Championship and we're about to tie the game, as opposed to, hey, it's all riding on this 1 4th down.
Do you think Detroit Lions fans, do you think many Detroit Lion fans are mad at Dan Campbell or blaming Dan Campbell? Because I think they're probably they're obviously heartbroken, but they had the most amazing season of their lives. Like I feel like they're heartbroken, but they're probably not mad at Dan Campbell.
I think it was probably one of those situations where they look at Dan Campbell and they're just like, we appreciate everything you've done for this team, but just don't let the obvious thing be the reason why we don't go further. Don't let sort of the boneheadedness be the reason that we don't keep going, or the macho and like that's kind of what happened. It's like, oh, 4th down, short distance. This is what we do. We got to go for it. And it's just like, right there, I would have loved to put, that coaching hat on a little bit tighter and say, hey, really think about this. Are we doing this for ego? Are we doing this for personality of the team? Or are we doing this to win the damn game?
He was staying true to himself when the situation called for the coach to adapt to the situation.
To me, that's a little bit of ego driven, but it's also, it's just stubborn. It's just stubborn. It's like, okay, I know you've done this the same way the whole time, but how many times have you done it in the NFC Championship game? How many times have you had to make these tough calls that in the long run are for the betterment of the team, and you don't have an ability to recover from? Because it's one thing to do this in the regular season game. It's another thing to do this in the NFC Championship game with everything on the line. And so I think, if anything, it will force him to be a little bit more flexible going forward, because you would assume now guy's got a long coaching career ahead of him.
Israel, what are we watching these days? Are you into any series?
Yeah, I'm actually running out of series to watch. I just watched that Griselda one on.
That does not interest me. That you're into that?
Oh, it was pretty good. I mean, if you like all the, sort of the drug cartels and those types of movies, it's mostly good because it was in Miami, and it's a lot of things that I know when I was a kid, I don't remember really reading about, but as I got older, it was just like, wow, all these things happened, just south of where I lived, etc. And so that part is pretty cool. But I watched that. I watched a lot of stuff. So redid season 1 of True Detective.
Oh, you know what? That's funny you say that, because I want to watch the new season that has started.
Just started it, yeah.
And I think I'm going to go back and watch season 1, because it's been like 5 years since I've seen it.
You really only need to watch it for the pacing if you just want to get used to that again. But in terms of like any sort of connection, there are a couple of little random,
Oh, no, I don't mean I want to watch it because of the connection. No, that's not what I mean. It just reminds me, it's like, all right, it's been long enough. I could probably go back and watch it and enjoy it again, because I don't remember everything.
Yeah. In that case, like that's what happened to me. And then season 2, I don't recommend going back and watching that one.
No, I've seen. Yeah, I'm not going to go back and watch season 2 or season 3, even though I enjoyed each of them fine enough, but they're not season 1. You know what I want to start watching, which everyone says is great. Have you ever watched Fargo?
I have not yet, and I have heard that it was great. That's John Hamm's in that now, right?
He's in this season, and apparently every season is its own entity. You don't have to watch from the beginning. Like, I know Billy Bob Thornton was season 1. John Hamm is in this season 4. I think I'm going to watch Fargo. Everyone says it's great.
I'm gonna ask you to report back to me on that one, because I've heard the same things, but I'm gonna trust your judgment if you watch that.
I got the good judgment, man. All right, excellent job, Israel. When are we going to see you on television again? Go ahead, plug something.
Friday, Around the Horn.
Okay,
that's all I got.
We're colleagues now. Like, you guys on Around the Horn, you guys are my colleagues as well. If you ever got an open spot there on Around the Horn, look how good I look in a box like this. I mean, come on. All right.
Yes.
Look how good I look, everybody.
In the meantime, if you got any fire takes you want to pass along to me, I'll credit you with them. I'll say ESPN Radio's own Jonathan ZASLOW has told me.
That's right. Our colleague.
Yes. Our colleague. Sorry.
Excellent job, Israel. Thanks for hanging out with us, man. I appreciate it.
No problem, Zaz.